I was sipping coffee from my father's old chipped mug on my dock when the HOA president stormed down the planks and told me I owed $300 by sunrise to use my own lake. I'd owned this water outright for weeks, but the look in her eyes told me something worse was coming. The morning was quiet enough to hear dragonflies tapping the surface. A cold Colorado breeze skimmed across the lake, rolling little ripples over the 12 acres I had bought fair and square. I'd moved here for peace, silence, space to breathe again after 15 years of environmental fieldwork. Just as I leaned back, letting my boots rest on the cedar planks, I heard the sharp click-click-click of heels. Not gravel, not dirt, planks. Someone trespassing. My stomach tightened. I already knew who it was before she even came into view. Margaret Halston, president of the Ridgeview Bluff HOA, woman in her late 50s with a posture stiff she could have been carved out of cold marble. Her blazer looked like it belonged at some charity gala. Not at 6 a.m. near a lake she didn't own. She held a paper between two fingers like it disgusted her to touch it. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes didn't blink much. The kind of expression people wear when they've already decided they're right before the conversation begins. She stopped 3 feet from me. "Mr. Dalton," she said, "your Lacusigan voice? Due immediately." I didn't move. Didn't even set down my mug, my Lacusage. "What?" She lifted her chin. "You heard me." Stood up slow, stretching my back from the chair's slouch, and took the paper. It had no letterhead, no seal. Just bold text, community water access fee, $300. Pay within 48 hours or be removed. I looked at her. "You know this lake is outside your subdivision's boundary, right?" Her smile stretched, thin and icy. "You think ownership gives you authority here?" That's adorable. A small black SUV sat on the road behind her, a company logo on its door, Summit Ridge Acquisitions. Didn't mean much yet, but the way the driver avoided looking at me, that meant something. I folded the invoice and slid it in my jacket pocket. "You're trespassing," I said plain. "You're monopolizing a community resource," she fired back. Her voice had that brittle tone of someone trying to sound powerful while hiding panic. Before I responded, my internal thought cut through the noise. She didn't come here to talk. She came here to intimidate. The breeze shifted. A gull cried overhead. My mug felt suddenly heavier in my hand. "You'll have your chance to explain yourself," she said. "Thursday night. Board meeting. Attendance expected. Expected. Not requested." Then she turned and marched back toward shore, her heels stabbing the planks like she wanted to leave dents behind. I watched her car crawl away, dust lifting behind the tires. My piece was officially over. By noon, the real trouble arrived in my inbox. This time it was an official violation with the HOA seal stamped on top. They accused me of blocking community access to the shore. The same shore I owned. The same lake I paid $462,000 for deed. Survey, water rights, all legal, all filed. I whispered to myself, this isn't incompetence. This is strategy. I called the management office. The woman on the phone sounded like she'd swallowed a script. "Book. No meeting spots available for 6 weeks. No appeal window. No email address for the board."
Every
question I asked hit a wall. A wall with Margaret's fingerprints on it. I hung up and stared at the lake. The surface looked calm, mirror flat. But I could feel the undertow of what was really happening. They're building a case against you. My mind warned. I headed inside and opened the old cedar drawer where I kept important documents. My father's handwriting was still on the inside panel. Truth wins when you write everything down. So I did. I created a folder on my laptop, Lake Dispute. Then I added photos of the fake invoice, screenshot of the violation, video clips from my dock cameras, a copy of my deed, the county survey boundaries showing the HOA's limit ending a half mile, North recording everything was second nature after years in the EPA. Document twice. Argue once. By the third day, the situation took a turn. I heard voices drifting across the lake, paddles dipping. Plastic knocking water for kayaks glided across my water. I walked down to the dock. "You folks know this lake isn't public," I called gently. One guy, early 40s, wearing a Ridgeview Bluff cap, winced. Margaret told us the new owner was still figuring things out. She said it's fine, still figuring things out? The disrespect rolled through me like heat. I pressed record on my phone, visible. Not aggressive. "Just to be clear," I said, "I own this lake outright." The kayakers exchanged awkward looks. "Sorry, man," one muttered. They turned back toward the ramp. Something inside my chest coiled tighter. Margaret is escalating. Testing boundaries that evening, my wife, Emily, found something even worse. The community's private message board had an entire post by Margaret calling me territorial, aggressive, and dangerous to neighborhood unity. Comments cheering her on. I added, "Screenshots to the evidence folder. Dates. Times.Emily." Touched my shoulder. "They're trying to isolate you. They're also building my defamation case." I said, I meant it 2 days later. A retired judge, Gregory Hale, approached me on his morning walk, tall, white-haired, calm, like someone who had seen a lot of battles and didn't scare easily. "You're the lake fellow," he said. I nodded. He lowered his voice, "Be careful. Margaret has run this neighborhood like a private kingdom for years. 2 families sold under pressure. Both properties ended up tied to her husband's business deals." Cold ripple went down my spine. "Anything you can prove," he added, "you document." "I already am." "Good," he said. "You're going to need it." That night, my security camera caught a hooded figure slipping an envelope into my mailbox. The footage was clear. The plate on the parked vehicle blurred halfway, but one dent on the bumper was unmistakable. The note inside read, "Sell the lake or pay for it." Emily stared at the paper. Hands trembling, I sealed the original in a plastic bag and uploaded photos to cloud backup. My internal thought was sharp and certain. This isn't HOA conflict anymore. This is organized pressure. The lake air felt colder than usual. While digging through county records, I found something that confirmed my fear. 4 years ago, Margaret tried to buy this lake. The owner before me refused, and in the HOA minutes archive, a single line. President Halston, to explore alternative options. Alternative options. I exhaled slowly. My father used to say, when someone can't take something honestly, they start taking it sideways. I now understood exactly what that meant. On day 9, I hired a licensed surveyor, a quiet man named Collins, who didn't waste words. "Boundaries clean," he said, pointing at the map. "HOA doesn't touch this lake. Not even close." I took photos of the map, then photos of him holding it, then photos of the marker flags he planted. Evidence layered on evidence. Saturday afternoon, 15 people walked onto my land in a strange mix of confidence and guilt. Margaret led them like a parade marshal. "Community walk," she said. "This is public easement." "There is no easement," I replied. A woman in the back flinched. A few men slowed down with uncomfortable eyes. "You'll regret this hostility," she snapped. I didn't respond, but my cameras did, recording every step that evening. The retired judge knocked on my door again. His voice was flat. "This is worse than I thought," he said. "Request the HOA's last 5 years of minutes. They are legally required to provide them." Emily handed him coffee. "What do you think they're planning?" she asked. He stared at the lake through the window. "Acquisition," he said. "A forced one." Tell. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox. Emergency HOA meeting. Thursday, 7 p.m. Topic: Community claim to lake access. Looked at Emily. "They're coming hard," she whispered. "They're desperate." I said, but my internal thought whispered something darker. They wouldn't rush like this unless they were close to something. The Thursday meeting sat in my calendar like a storm alert. 3 days to go. 3 days before the HOA tried turning my lake into their bargaining chip. I spent those days sharpening evidence the way man sharpens tools before winter. The lake stayed quiet, but I could feel bad intentions moving beneath the surface like cold currents. Every morning, I walked down to the dock with my father's old thermos. The cedar boards creaked under my boots the same way they used to when I was a kid helping him repair our fence back home. Even the smell of the lake water felt familiar, safe, but nothing around me was safe anymore. On Tuesday, while organizing video files, I heard a rumble on the gravel road. I stepped outside. A crew of workers in neon vests stood near the road holding clipboards and digging stakes into the ground. "What are you doing?" I called. One guy avoided eye contact. HOA ordered a shoreline assessment. "Funny, the HOA had no shoreline here." "You're on private land," I said. He swallowed. "Lady in the blazer said this was community controlled." "The lady in the blazer doesn't own a single pebble here." I lifted my phone, recording the man's side. "We'll pack up." They left without argument, but the fact they'd shown up at all told me something. Margaret didn't want said out loud. She was preparing for the vote. A big one by Wednesday afternoon. The neighborhood behavior started changing. People walking their dogs stopped looking me in the eye. A couple pushing a stroller crossed to the opposite side of the road when they saw me. But others watched me with something else in their eyes. Conflict. Doubt, maybe guilt. A silver-haired woman paused near my mailbox. "You're the lake man," she said quietly. "Margaret told everyone you were threatening families." I raised an eyebrow. "Threatening how?" She hesitated, glancing around like someone expecting to be overheard. She said you shouted at kayakers. Said you installed surveillance to intimidate people. Did she say anything about my property deed? Her mouth tightened. She didn't mention that. Of course she didn't, single quotes. The woman leaned in slightly. "Be careful Thursday," she whispered. "She's planning something. She has the board wrapped around her finger." Then she hurried off. Inside my chest, something tightened like a rope pulled hard. She isn't just misusing authority, I thought. She's building a narrative. When someone controls the story, they control the crowd. But only until the truth breaks through. That evening, a knock rattled the screen door. I opened it to find Gregory Hale, the retired judge, holding a white envelope. "The minutes you requested," he said. "They're legally obligated to provide them, but Margaret will try to claim these aren't official. Don't let that rattle you." Inside were 5 years' worth of HOA meeting notes, and buried inside those notes were the seeds of a conspiracy. Patterns emerged. Certain families fined repeatedly. Noise violations on homes that bordered development land. Pressure tactics disguised as community adjustments. And one phrase that kept returning every few months: opportunity properties. I felt a small chill crawl across my shoulders. This isn't an HOA problem, I thought. This is a business model. Wednesday night slipped into Thursday with a tension that felt heavy enough to bend the air. Wind rattled pine branches. A small ripple crossed the lake without wind. Maybe a fish. Maybe something deeper. Emily found me on the porch around midnight. Staring at the dark water. "You look like your dad," she said softly. I smiled faintly. He'd have told me to stand my ground. He'd say it louder than that. I nodded. My father never raised his voice, but he didn't move when someone pushed him either. He built fences with purpose and repaired boards with patience. He used to say, "A man doesn't protect land. Land protects the man who respects it." A thought settled in my chest like an anchor. Thursday evening, I parked at the community center 15 minutes early. The lot was full, too full. Something orchestrated. I carried my laptop bag in one hand, my father's old thermos in the other. Inside, the room buzzed like a nest stirred with a stick. Margaret stood up front in a navy blazer, smiling with all her teeth but none of her eyes. Her posture was sharp enough to poke holes in the air. On the projector behind her, giant slide read, "Community water access rights vote tonight." People murmured. Some excited. Some nervous. I took a seat in the third row. Margaret's gaze locked on me for a heartbeat, nothing warm behind it. Just calculation. She clicked her mic on. Thank you all for coming. Tonight we address the misuse of a beloved shared lake by its new restrictive owner. Gasps, murmurs. She was playing to the crowd like she'd rehearsed it 10 times. She pointed to the next slide. A picture of my no trespassing sign zoomed in to look harsher. Mr. Dalton has prevented elderly residents from fishing where they have fished for decades. He has blocked kayak access. He has threatened families who merely wanted to enjoy the morning scenery. I stood up slow. That's a lie, I said calmly. Her jaw tightened. There will be time for your statements later. Some sympathetic, some loyal to her, some unsure. Emily squeezed my shoulder gently before sitting. Margaret clicked to the next slide. A resolution document. Pre-written, approved by the board, claiming the lake was a shared heritage resource. This wasn't a discussion. This was an ambush. When she finally pointed at me, her fake politeness cracked. Mr. Dalton, the floor is yours. I connected my laptop to the projector. The screen flipped. First slide, my deed with county stamp. Boundary lines in red. HOA territory ending far away from the lake. A ripple moved through the room, silent, sharp. This lake, I said, has never belonged to this HOA. Not in any document. Not in any survey. Not in any bylaw. What you are being asked to vote on is illegal. Someone near the back raised a hand. Can the board actually seize it? No, I said plainly. They're banking on you not knowing that. Then I clicked to my next slide, the leaked HOA minutes. Opportunity properties, repeated again and again. Margaret's expression twitched. Those are irrelevant. I cut her off. Then why did you classify the last 2 families who sold as opportunity properties just months before your husband bought the land through his shell company? The room froze. Gasps. Side whispers. Margaret's face drained of color. A man stood from the second row. Is that true, Margaret? She didn't answer. I clicked to the next slide, the one that broke the room in half. The threatening note. The video still of the car, the dent on the bumper, the partial plate. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's Gerald's car." Margaret snapped, "Enough. This meeting is not a trial." I stepped closer to the projector. It becomes one when lives get manipulated. Her jaw clenched hard enough to crack a tooth. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes kept blinking too fast. A classic tell of someone losing control. A woman in the front row stood up. "You told us he was dangerous. You lied to us, didn't you?" Another man, "We trusted you." And someone else, "What else are you hiding?" Margaret opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. She just stared at me like I'd pulled the floor out from under her. "Let's vote," she suddenly barked. Now, but the room didn't follow. No raised hands. No cheers. Just silence. Then Gregory Hale rose slowly. Before any vote, he said, "The community deserves to know one more thing." He turned to me. I nodded. Gregory pointed toward the side doors. "Step in, please." 3 people entered. 2 men. 1 woman. All holding folders. "Former board members," Gregory said, removed after challenging Margaret's tactics. The room erupted into murmurs. They placed the folders on a table, each one labeled HOA, Pressure Incidents Year Filed. I looked at Margaret. Her face was hollow now, like someone whose mask had finally cracked. Margaret slammed her binder shut. "This meeting is adjourned." She shouted. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit. But before she reached the door, A dark sedan pulled up outside. Two figures stepped out. Badges glinted under the STREETLIGHT. The room inhaled sharply. Emily whispered, "Is that?" I nodded slowly. County investigators. Margaret froze halfway to the door. Her shoulders stiffened. Her hand tightened around the purse strap. One investigator called out, "Mrs. Halston, we need to speak with you regarding a series of filings connected to Summit Ridge acquisitions." The entire room went dead silent. Margaret turned toward the crowd with wide, brittle eyes. "You." Her voice trembled. "You don't understand what you've started." I held up my father's old thermos. "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped what you started." Her gaze shook, and then she whispered, "This isn't over." But the investigator stepped forward. "Ma'am, it actually might be. Fade out." The investigators didn't arrest Margaret that night. They didn't need to. Their presence alone shattered whatever grip she still had on the room by the time she walked out of the community center. The same neighbors she once commanded now peeled away from her path like she carried a storm around her. Even her closest supporters didn't meet her eyes. But I knew this wasn't the end. People like Margaret don't fall quietly. Friday morning, I sat on the porch with my father's thermos warming my hands. The lake was a sheet of still glass. A few trout broke the surface, sending tiny rings through the silence. Emily stepped out beside me. "You think she'll come back swinging?" I watched the ripples disappear. She already is. She's just switching tactics. Within an hour, my prediction proved right. A mass email from the HOA blasted everyone's inbox. Emergency Legal Defense Fund. Community under attack by vindictive homeowner. My name wasn't written, but everyone knew who she meant. Emily's jaw tightened. "She's trying to flip the narrative again." I nodded. "She's trying to create chaos before her house of cards collapses." That evening, the knock on my door wasn't angry. It was hesitant. Almost embarrassed. Sandra, one of the board members, stood there clutching a small flash drive. She kept glancing at the road behind her as if expecting someone to watch. "I didn't sign up for this," she whispered. "I thought we were helping the neighborhood." I didn't know what she was doing behind the scenes. I motioned her inside. "Tell me everything." She sat at the kitchen table, fingers trembling. "She started pushing everyone months before you moved in. The minute she saw your lake listing, she started planning." She told the board, "If we can pressure him just enough, he'll fold like the last ones." Emily's eyes widened. "The last ones?" Sandra nodded. "She used violations and social pressure to force them out. Both families sold below value. Her husband's company bought the land within weeks. Was the missing link, motive, pattern, profit?" Sandra slid the flash drive across the table. "These are emails. The ones she deleted from the official server. I copied them before she restricted access. Inside those files were months of messages. Margaret coordinating finds Gerald discussing acquisition timelines. Summit Ridge sending valuation plans. A quote that hit me like a punch. "Once we secure the lake, Ridge will finalize 48-unit plan. Pressure increases next month." Pressure. A sanitized word for harassment. I thanked Sandra. She squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And then she left quickly, like someone escaping a burning building. Saturday morning, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into my driveway. Deputy Harlan stepped out, tall, measured. The kind of man who carried authority without raising his voice. He held a folder. "You reported a threat last week," said. "We've been reviewing footage." He opened the folder and slid a still image across my porch table. It was the dark sedan. Same dent above the taillight. Same plate numbers visible in the enhanced frame. "Belongs to Gerald Halston," he said plainly. Emily sucked in a breath. So the HOA's vice president's husband delivered the threat himself. I said, "Looks that way," Harlan replied. "This now qualifies as criminal harassment and evidence tampering." He tapped the folder. "And there's something else. Summit Ridge filed a complaint yesterday, claiming they had no knowledge of Gerald's involvement. They're cooperating fast. You don't turn that quickly unless you're scared. Paused. You ready for what comes next? I nodded. Yes. Good, he said, because wheels are in motion. The next 4 days blurred into one long procession of events. Day 1, County Audit County Inspector visited the HOA office. Neighbors watched through windows as boxes of documents were removed. Whispers rippled through Ridgeview Bluff like wildfire. People who avoided me earlier now approached me with cautious apologies. I didn't know what she was doing. She told us you were dangerous. We believed her. We shouldn't have. I didn't hold grudges. Margaret manipulated them the way she manipulated everyone. Day 2. The board fractures. 3 board members resigned publicly. 2 recorded statements for investigators. 1 line from a board member hit hard. Margaret made all decisions privately. We voted out of fear. Day 3, the husband breaks summit. Ridge executives handed over more emails. 1 from Gerald read, Margaret will push lake acquisition next meeting. Make sure paperwork is ready. Direct involvement. Clear intent. A pattern spanning years. Day 4, the press gets wind. A small Colorado news station published a segment. Local HOA president under investigation for property harassment scheme. Margaret's face on screen. My lake blurred in the background. Neighbors watched the segment on repeat. The tide had turned. People now knocked on my door, not with anger, but with baked pies, apologies, and supportive words. A week later, the HOA held a mandatory emergency session, not in the community center. In the school auditorium, because the crowd was too large, I arrived early. People nodded at me. Some thanked me, and then Margaret entered. No blazer, no confident stride, just a strained stiffness barely holding her together. When she reached the stage, the room fell silent. Gregory Hale stood up first. Mrs. Halston, he said, you are facing criminal investigation. You no longer have the authority to run this board. Marguerite lifted her chin. I was elected, Gregory. Cut in. You were trusted. That trust is gone. The room erupted. Not in chaos, but in agreement. Years of pent-up frustration spilled out. She'll find my mother for a bird feeder. She towed my truck illegally. She banned my daughter from chalk drawings. You've lied to us. Margaret's lips trembled. You don't understand, but the crowd shouted louder. We do now. Her last grip on power snapped like a twig. Her gavel, the one she used to silence others, sat untouched on the table. She reached for it anyway. A trembling hand, desperate for authority. And then Deputy Harland stepped forward with 2 county officials. His voice was steady. Mrs. Halston, please step down. Margaret's shoulders sagged. Her hand fell away from the gavel, and in that moment, with the entire community watching, she whispered, you all deserve someone strong. The irony was bitter. Strong people protect. They don't manipulate. 2 days later, county judge signed the order. Ridgeview Bluff HOA placed under temporary receivership. President suspended. Board dissolved. Summit Ridge filed an official statement. We terminate all ties with Gerald Halston. And then came the final strike. An officer delivered a summons to their front door. Charges pending. A neighbor who witnessed it said Margaret didn't speak a word. Just stood there, staring at the lake she once believed she'd control. One quiet morning, weeks later, I walked down to my dock with my father's old thermos. The lake was calm again. Completely mine. Not just legally, spiritually. The stress had settled into something gentler. A weight lifted. Emily joined me, leaning against the railing. You did it, she said softly. We did it, I corrected. The reflection of pine trees shimmered across the water. Cormorants perched on fallen logs. The world felt right again, and for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Peace. I cast a line into the lake, the reel humming softly. A trout tugged once and darted away. Emily laughed softly. You're smiling. I am, I admitted. She rested her head on my shoulder. What now? I watched the ripples fade. There's always someone like Margaret, I said. But there's also always someone willing to stand up. The wind lifted slightly. Cool, clean, familiar. My father's words drifted through my head. Land doesn't love cowards. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud of the man staring back at me from the water below. If this entire mess taught me anything, it's that bullies don't disappear when you ignore them. They disappear when you document, stand firm, refuse to surrender the truth, no matter how loud the lies get. Communities fall apart when fear leads. They heal when real people step forward, and sometimes, protecting the quietest places in your life requires the loudest fight. If you've ever been targeted by an HOA or dealt with a neighbor who abused authority, tell your story in the comments. And subscribe to Neighbor Loom for more real HOA justice stories where homeowners rise and abusers fall.